You know what makes a story truly frightening and captivating? It's not because it's elaborately staged or deliberately crafted to be horrifying, but because it comes from real experiences happening to ordinary people just like us. Moments that strike without warning in familiar places we believe are safe, making us realize that if it happened to them, it could just as easily happen to you. Before we begin, I have a question for you. What's the one winter moment in your life that still gives you chills? Comment it below. I read every single one, and your story might even inspire a future episode. What you're about to hear tonight are all true stories sent in by the people who experienced them. And if you've ever gone through anything strange, unusual, or haunting, send your story to the email in the description. You never know. It might appear in the next video. If you're ready, turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next set of true encounters. Now, let's get started. I grew up on the slopes, skiing since before I understood how unusual that was, and every winter felt like home to me, which is why I never questioned going on that Christmas trip with my college friends when we were all 21 and craving one more adventure before the year ended. But I had no idea that this would be the trip that ended skiing for me completely because of something that happened deep in the snowy woods of Vermont that still crawls back into my mind every holiday season like a shadow I can't get rid of. We arrived at the mountain in the afternoon, the sun lowering behind the peaks and painting everything gold, and the slopes felt endless, the air crisp, the kind of day where you think nothing bad can possibly happen because the world just looks too beautiful to allow it. My friends were loud and playful, arguing about which run to hit next, when two women appeared beside us at the top of the lift, moving through the crowd like they were supposed to be there, even though something about them felt strangely out of place. Maybe the way they carried themselves, or the way their eyes lingered too long on us. They introduced themselves as Riley and Marissa, tall, confident, dressed in ski gear that somehow looked too clean for a long day on the mountain. They joked with us easily, and my friends, being who they were, welcomed the attention instantly, laughing and soaking up every word those girls gave them. But something about their energy put a knot in my stomach, like they were pushing the friendliness a little too hard. Then Riley pulled out a slim silver flask, waving it like it was some kind of invitation, saying we needed something stronger than the weak drinks most college guys brag about. And everyone except me took a swig without hesitation, swallowing it like it was nothing, laughing about how harsh it was. When the flask reached me, I lifted it like I was joining in, but I only let a tiny drop touch my tongue, because the moment it hit my mouth, my instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. The burn felt too sharp, too chemical, and Riley's eyes didn't move off me even once. I faked a cough, pretended it went down rough, then handed it back, wiping my sleeve quickly so none of it stayed on my skin. They encouraged us to follow them to a trail they said only locals knew about, a hidden run that cut through untouched trees and ended at some VIP lot at the base, and my friends, half buzzed and excited, didn't hesitate for a second. Even though the trail wasn't marked on the map, and no patrollers mentioned anything about side routes that day, still I followed, because the sun was dipping fast and I didn't want to split from the group. The second we crossed into the forest, the wind disappeared, the resort noise vanished, and everything around us grew unnaturally quiet. Just the sound of skis carving into deep, untouched powder as we followed Riley and Marissa deeper than we should have gone. 10 minutes in, I started feeling lightheaded, not dizzy, but like my body was slowing from the inside out, a heaviness climbing my limbs. And that's when I looked at my friends and realized the drug in the flask was working fast, too fast, their eyes glassy, their movements sloppy, their laughs fading into confusion. I tried to warn them, but my voice felt thick, my tongue sluggish, and every breath came out colder than the last. Riley and Marissa stopped ahead of us in a small clearing where the trees closed in tightly, and when they turned around, the friendly expressions they greeted us with were gone, replaced by something flat, calculating, like they'd dropped the act entirely. Before I could speak, a figure stepped out from behind a dark tree, tall, wearing a heavy coat and a mask that hid everything except the outline of his jaw. And he didn't say a word, just stood there as if waiting for us to fall. My legs buckled, and I went down on one knee, fighting the fog taking over my brain while my friends collapsed fully, trying to push themselves up but barely lifting their heads. The girls backed up toward the masked man, exchanging a look with him like this was all planned, and dread flooded me so hard I felt it shake my bones. The world narrowed, my vision warping, and the last thing I remember before everything went black was hearing Marissa laugh softly, not loud or playful, but almost curious, like she was watching a routine unfold exactly as expected. When I woke, my face was pressed into snow so cold it stung, and the forest around me was silent again, but in a way that felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. My body was heavy, sluggish, but I forced myself to sit up, my chest tightening when I realized my friends were gone. My heart hammered as branches snapped somewhere behind me, steady, careful footsteps getting closer, and the fear that hit me then didn't feel like panic. It felt like instinct, like something ancient screaming that I had to run now or I was not leaving those woods alive. I pushed myself up on shaky legs and stumbled through the trees, gripping trunks to stay balanced, while every part of my body felt like it was sinking into molasses. When I glanced back, I saw the faint beam of a flashlight moving deliberately through the woods, sweeping left to right, like someone was tracking me calmly, confidently, like they knew I wouldn't get far. That terrified me more than anything, that lack of rush, that sense that they already understood how this would end. I kept running, lungs burning, until I heard an engine rumble somewhere behind the thick trees, a van door sliding, men speaking in low tones I couldn't make out, and I realized this wasn't random, this wasn't impulsive, this was organized. My legs nearly gave out at that thought alone. Somehow, through pure luck or adrenaline, the faint glow of the ski resort lights appeared through the trees like a miracle, and I pushed myself toward it with everything I had left. I burst from the woods and collapsed onto the groomed snow at the edge of the resort, waving at the nearest patrollers, my voice cracking as I tried to call for help. They ran to me, pulling me up as I choked out what happened, and within minutes, more patrollers and rescue teams were heading into the woods. They found my friends scattered in different areas, unconscious but alive, stripped of jackets and gear, and left helpless in the cold. No trace of Riley, Marissa, the masked man, or the van was ever found, not a single track that investigators could trace, despite the fresh snow. The only evidence was a discarded syringe, half buried near a tree, filled with a tranquilizer strong enough to take down large animals. My friends recovered, physically at least, but I never went back to skiing after that. Every Christmas, the memory floods back uninvited. The faces of those girls, the cold blankness in that masked man's stance, and the horrifying realization that whoever they were, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they are still out there, somewhere, waiting for their next group of strangers to wander too deep into the snow. My family owns a small, old vacation home in Oklahoma, a place that always felt special because it was tied to skiing trips, winter storms, and some of the happiest days of my childhood, even though the house itself was already aging long before I was born. My parents bought it in the early years of their marriage, long before the peeling paint, the creaking floors, and the sagging windows made it obvious that it was pushing 40 years old. But as a kid, none of that mattered to me. To me and my older brother Josh, that house was the center of every adventure, especially during winter breaks, when we would head up to Colorado during snowstorms and play for hours in the open fields and endless woods surrounding the property. One Christmas break about 15 years ago, when I was 8 and Josh was 11, a massive blizzard rolled in, the kind that makes the world go quiet except for the howling wind and the crunch of snow under heavy boots. While the adults stayed inside near the fire, Josh and I bundled up and ran outside, excited to start one of our favorite games. We created 2 forts, told each other where they were, then built a giant snowball, the jewel, that we had to sneak into the other base and steal. Josh picked his fort on the neighboring property, a huge empty lot that almost never had anyone staying in it, which made it perfect for games. Once he took off down the road to get into position, I waited for him to blow the whistle. 5 minutes passed, then 7, then 10, and the only sound I heard was the wind cutting across the fields. Eventually, I assumed he must have blown the whistle, and the storm drowned it out, so I chose the safer path down the road instead of the woods and trudged through unpacked snow toward his fort. When I reached the property and looked through the bare winter trees, I could clearly see Josh's fort, but not Josh. That uneasy silence in the air made my stomach twist a little, but I stepped through the trees anyway, thinking maybe he was hiding. I looked around, called his name softly, then walked toward the fort to grab the jewel. That's when a woman's voice cut through the storm. "Excuse me, are you looking for your brother?" she shouted from the front steps of the neighbor's house. I turned and saw an older woman standing there, her face pale and wrinkled, her expression stretched into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I yelled back that we were playing a game. She replied, "Your brother isn't here." Something about the way she said it sent a strange cold through my chest. As I walked closer to the house, I noticed someone watching me from an upstairs window. For a moment, I thought it was Josh, but the figure's face was half covered by a black beanie, and the lower half was hidden under the window frame. They didn't move, they didn't wave, they just stared. That was the moment every hair on my body stood up, because the woods behind me were completely silent, and I suddenly realized there were 2 sets of footprints leading to the front door. One set the woman stood in, and another that looked like they belonged to Josh. But the second set didn't continue into the house. They doubled back and vanished into the woods. My heart dropped. The woman kept smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was wide and stiff, like she was forcing it, and then she waved me in, saying I should come inside to warm up. Something in me finally snapped. Instead of walking closer, I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Joshh," hoping he would answer. The woman froze. The smile faded instantly, replaced by a look I didn't understand at the time but now recognize as shock and annoyance, maybe even anger. Then, inside the house, I heard heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. I didn't wait another second. I turned and sprinted through the snow, retracing my footprints as fast as my little legs could carry me. I could hear the woman shouting something behind me, either at me or at whoever was inside, but the wind swallowed her voice. I didn't look back. By the time I reached our driveway, I saw my dad and Josh coming down the hill, both shouting my name through the storm. Josh ran up to me immediately, breathless, saying someone in the neighbor's house tried to get him to come inside too. The fear in his eyes confirmed everything I felt. Before I even spoke, Dad's face changed from confusion to something darker, and he marched down the road with a tool in his hand, telling us to get inside with Mom. We waited and waited until Dad finally came back, snow covering his shoulders, saying the front door was locked but someone had definitely been inside. We drove to another neighbor's place, and they called the actual owners of the house. What happened next still makes my stomach twist even as an adult. The owners said no one was supposed to be there. No guests, no relatives, no workers, nothing. The house was empty for the season. The police came and searched the place. The back door was unlocked, but whoever had been inside was already gone. No one was ever found. No explanation ever came. After that, my brother and I never stepped foot on that property again. Even now, when I think about that storm and the woman's too wide smile and a silent figure staring down at me from the window, I feel that same cold I felt at 8 years old. Thank God we didn't step inside that house. I still think about what happened 8 years ago, back when my friends and I thought being 19 made us untouchable, and doing reckless things somehow made us interesting, and even now when Sean and I talk, This is the one night we always circle back to because it changed the way we think about abandoned places forever. We lived in a small New Jersey town filled with empty houses and forgotten buildings, and the one that always stood out was the old church at the top of the hill, a crumbling structure everyone in town whispered about but never actually visited after dark. James, who we don't talk to anymore, suggested we bring a Ouija board there one night in late October, and since we were bored, stupid, and eager for a scare, we agreed without thinking. Sean had the board in his closet and even brought 3 candles to set the mood, and I drove us up the blocked-off road where we had to park and walk the rest of the way in the cold. The closer we got, the more the woods swallowed the sound around us until the church appeared at the top of the hill like a giant shadow. The front door was cracked open and scraped against the floor when we pulled it, and the inside smelled of dust and wet wood, the air thick with something old and heavy. We searched the place with our flashlights to make sure no one else was inside, and then Sean set the board down near the altar and lit the candles in a triangle. When we turned off our lights, the room shrank into a circle of dim orange glow that barely reached 6 feet in any direction, making every corner feel alive. Sean asked the first cheesy question, "Is anybody there?" And the planchette immediately started to move in slow little slides that made us laugh at first because one of them had to be doing it, and that was exactly when we heard it, a sharp cracking noise from the altar, like someone snapping a thick piece of wood in half with their bare hands. We jumped, hearts pounding, and all 3 flashlights snapped toward the noise, but nothing moved, no shadows shifted, and no one answered when we called out. We tried to shrug it off because the place was old, but none of us were relaxed anymore. We asked more questions, but the planchette didn't move again, almost like whatever joke was happening before had ended, or whatever was listening had lost interest, and then the silence settled the way it does right before something terrible happens. Another sound echoed from the altar, softer this time, like something being dragged, and before we could shine our lights, something smacked the Ouija board so hard that all 3 of us screamed and fell backward. A rock the size of a golf ball sat perfectly centered on the board, still shaking slightly from the impact, and there was no way to explain how it got there because all 3 of our hands had been on the planchette. We didn't even think, we ran. We bolted out of the church with our flashlights bouncing wildly, racing down the hill and slipping in the gravel, convinced that something was behind us, even though we never turned around to look. We didn't stop running until we reached my car, and even then we sat inside with the doors locked, breathing so hard it hurt, talking over each other, trying to make sense of what just happened because the fear was still crawling up our backs like icy fingers. Sean was convinced we'd contacted a spirit and disturbed it, and even though I wasn't the superstitious one, the idea that someone else might have been hiding inside that church with us felt just as terrifying. The next day, Sean and James went back to retrieve the Ouija board because Sean refused to leave it behind, but when they arrived, the candles were still arranged exactly the way we left them, melted wax frozen in little pools, and the board itself was gone, not moved, not broken, just missing, as if someone or something had taken only that. They didn't search the place. They didn't look for footprints. They didn't even stay long enough to process what they were seeing. They just left. And to this day, none of us knows whether there was someone hiding in that dark church with us, or whether something we never should have called out to actually answered. But what I do know is that I have never touched another Ouija board again, and I never will, not after the single scariest night of my life. It happened in Warren County, Georgia, one of those quiet, rural places where the air feels still and the roads stretch out forever. My girlfriend Marissa and I were driving around that afternoon, trying to imagine what it would be like to live somewhere so open and peaceful, especially with her dream of having a barn for her horses someday. The winter sun was low, the roads nearly empty, and the whole world felt strangely calm, in a way that made us think maybe this could be a new beginning for us. But then, we passed a small church on the side of a lonely dirt road with cars in the lot, old cars mostly, the kind that looked like they belonged to a town frozen in time, and Marissa, being far more devoted than me, got excited and asked if maybe a weekday mass was happening and if we could check it out. I pulled into the lot without thinking twice, parking next to a beat-up red minivan, and the minute we stepped inside, everything felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain at first, because the church was tiny but packed with people sitting in absolute silence, all facing forward, not praying, not singing, just sitting like they were waiting for something. As we slid quietly into the last pew, the closest people slowly turned their heads to look at us, one at a time, and the moment they stared, others did too, until nearly everyone was facing us with this cold, blank expression that made my skin crawl. No one smiled, no one nodded, no one even pretended to welcome us, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist tight. Every single person in that room was a man. Not elderly, not families, not the kind of mix you see in any normal weekday mass, just men in their 30s and 40s, all dressed in plain clothes that didn't match any kind of church setting. And they weren't looking at me. They were looking at Marissa, their eyes following her like she was something they weren't expecting to see. Before I could process any of that, a man at the front of the room stepped forward, wearing a mask over his face. Not a medical mask, not a church mask, but one of those blank, expressionless ones that hides every feature, and he pointed straight at us and said, "Who invited you here?" His voice was low and calm, yet somehow colder than the room itself, and the second he spoke, I knew we had walked into something we were never meant to see. I tried to keep my voice steady when I said we were just passing by and thought Mass was happening, but he didn't even respond like a normal priest would have. He just stared and said, "You need to leave now," with this tone that wasn't a suggestion but a warning. Marissa squeezed my arm, and we got up fast, walking out as calmly as we could, though every nerve in my body was screaming to run. The moment the door shut behind us, we sprinted to the car, and as I pulled out, I saw one of the men walking quickly toward that same red minivan, climbing in like he had somewhere urgent to be. I told myself we were overthinking it, that he was just leaving at the same time, but when we hit the road and saw that van in the rearview mirror turning onto the same street and creeping up behind us, slow but steady, my heart sank. I told Marissa to put the sheriff's office into the GPS, and we drove straight there without stopping once, the van following us the entire way, not tailgating, not trying to pass, just shadowing us like they wanted us to know they were there. Only when we pulled into the public safety parking lot did the van keep going down the road without hesitation, like it had gotten whatever answer it came for. We sat in silence for a moment, trying to steady our breathing, and then we drove straight home without discussing it until we were miles away. Even now, I have no idea what we walked into that day, but it wasn't a mass, and it wasn't a church gathering. It felt organized, secretive, like some sort of cult meeting disguised as something harmless, and I still don't know why they didn't lock the door, why they met in daylight, or why one of their members followed us until we reached the police. All I know is that we never looked at Warren County again, and we never will.